Hello again, and welcome to Watch the Media. I'm John Shrader. We're joined this time around by Robin Washut, who covers football and men's basketball and recruiting for Husker Online, one of the online digital properties here in Nebraska. And he's been doing that for almost 20 years, and he has some pretty good insights on a men's basketball team that is in the top 10 and a football program that has been struggling. Hope you enjoy this conversation. For those of you watching this is the vision of a busy man sitting in his car, ready to chat a little bit about what he does. Robin Washut, for almost 2 decades now, has been covering Husker sports for Husker Online, and On3 is part of their venture now, or they're part of On3's venture now. And we're going to talk a little bit about what he does and why and how and more. So, Robin, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me, John.
Absolutely. You know, you guys sit around and talk about Husker sports all the time on your podcast. So I'm going to sit around and talk about you for a little bit, if that's okay.
Oh, boy.
What in the world made you think you wanted to be in the journalism, reporting, sports business way back when? And I guess the follow to that will be, I'll follow when it's necessary. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a interesting story because, my dad was a professor at the University of Northern Iowa. And so he was very on me about figuring out what I wanted to do, what, type of degree I was going to pursue and all that sort of thing. So probably about sophomore year of high school, he was asking me what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know, business, the most generic answer ever. And he was like, all right, well, what kind of business? I was like, I don't know. I'm just kind of putzing around. And then he was like, all right, I'm looking at your report cards. The thing you're best at is English. The thing you care most about is sports. What can you do to combine those two things? And he kind of pushed me to go apply for the Lincoln High School Advocate, the school paper at Lincoln High. And I did it, and they took me on, and I started covering Lincoln High sports for the monthly school paper there. And then that translated to a sports clerk job at the Lincoln Journal-Star, or answering phones and taking down high school scores, and did that long enough that opened some doors to start doing some, little mundane Lincoln Stars or Lincoln Salt Dogs stories or whatever it was, and joined the Daily Nebraskan when I got to college, and that I jumped right into it just because of some staff turnover. I jumped into volleyball when they had a Final Four run right away as a freshman, and then sophomore year started covering football. And from that point on, there was really no turning back. It's honestly the only full-time job I've ever had. And people ask me, well, what would you do if you weren't a sports writer? And I have no idea. I don't even know how my skill set would translate into the real world, because I fortunately have not had to do any what I call real work because of how fortunate I am with this career.
Well, you can collaborate, you can communicate, you can organize, you can interpret, you can do it very quickly. You know how to write. I think you can translate all of those things into just about anything. I'm not pandering. I mean that. You can translate all of those things into just about anything, except maybe, I don't want you operating on me if I'm in the hospital, but you could probably,
you could
probably turn it into quite a few things short of that.
Well, that's good to know, because in the state of our journalism industry, I don't think anything's guaranteed from year to year. So just riding the wave as we go.
When you got that, I hate to use this metaphor, when you got that bug or that virus, that whatever it is that's in us, which I got when I was about 12 or 13 and I never lost it. Has there ever been a time when you didn't get up in the morning and say, this is what I want to do, irrespective of your thought that you can't do anything else, irrespective of that? Is there ever been a time when you said, man, this is not what I want to do today?
Yeah. I mean, there was a point. So out of college, I took a job at a little small town paper out in southwestern Colorado, the Montrose Daily Press. And it was fun. I got to do a lot of unique things, cover some sports I never would have ever possibly imagined writing about. But after about a year, I was like, all right, this just isn't really the scene for me. I was a 24-year-old single guy in a town that really wasn't geared towards 24-year-old single guys. And, I just was coming off covering, Nebraska football for the Daily Nebraskan, going on road trips, going to bowl games, all that sort of thing. So like, I was like, this really isn't what I want to do forever. And so I sent my resume out to anyone that would listen, and got pretty much the door slammed in my face after door. And, I was getting real discouraged, to where I eventually was pretty much set to get out of the industry entirely. There was a buddy of mine that worked for a surveying company out in Cheyenne, Wyoming, that helped me get in with his bosses, and it was going to be this really nice starting salary. And I was like, all right, well, you know what, I can go live in Wyoming for a while and make some good money, and start to just kind of pivot my life. And I did an interview and essentially got verbally hired. And um, as fate would have it, later that week, Sean Callahan called me and offered me the job with what is now Husker Online, and haven't looked back since. But going back to that point, yeah, I was kind of just resigned to the fact, like, well, this whole sports writing thing, it was fun while it lasted, but I guess the real world is trying to tell me that I got to go get a real job. And like I said, I was very, very close. Had I not gotten that call from Sean, I would probably not be a sports writer for the last 20 years.
Yeah. That real job thing is a little overrated. I think
So I've heard.
I was about 20, I think, the last time I had a real job, and, worked on an irrigation company in my hometown, and worked
Yeah.
on a farm. And then, man, this real
I was
work
gonna
stuff
say
is,
that's real work. It's a
yeah,
lot, a
yeah,
little different than sitting at a keyboard covering sports.
yeah. No, I admire people who do real work. I
No
really
doubt.
do.
No doubt.
I'm just thankful I'm not one of them. So you, here's your chance, because I'm sure Sean Callahan won't listen to us, although he
Never know.
probably will. What is it that keeps you coming? Let's see. Math was not my best subject, probably why I went into journalism, but
Same.
I'm looking at about 18 years
Yep.
at
Yep.
Husker Online. Is it about that place that keeps you coming back and wanting to be there?
Well, Sean's a great boss. For one, he was kind of a pioneer in this whole like multimedia shift. Where it was predominantly just TV, newspapers, radio. He was the first guy that was covering recruiting for an internet site. When Rivals first started, he was doing recruiting updates for Rivals, like back in 2003, maybe even before then. So like he was kind of the first in this market to kind of set out on that new path. And so he's always kind of been forward thinking as a businessman, and the way that we present content. And I've learned a lot just with this shift, because I grew up trained in the newspaper world, where you would go do your interviews, come back to the newsroom, and write your story, and then it would be edited by 5 different people, and you get it published in the morning when the paper came out. Well, now we're writing stories with as fast as you possibly can write it, with 0 editors outside of yourself, and now thank goodness for Grammarly. And it's kind of it's just a that Sean's kind of forward thinking allowed me to transition to this new world a lot easier than probably otherwise would. So that's a big part of it. And he's just a good boss. He takes care of his employees. I'm technically an independent contractor, so I don't get benefits or anything like that. But Sean's always been really good about making sure that he takes care of his guys and his employees, and it's not like a boss employee relationship, which I think also is a big part of that too. Like, I consider Sean one of my very good friends, and that healthy dynamic that we have makes it a lot easier to come to work every day and communicate. And there's a mutual respect there, where I respect him and what he's built, and he respects me for what I've been able to do with my career thus far. And so it's I think a really healthy dynamic that it would take probably a pretty significant opportunity to come my way to think about going somewhere else. And the other part of it too is, I've got married and I got kids now, and so like the idea of jumping around from job to job doing all these things is a little less appealing than maybe it was 10 years ago. And Sean is a fellow family man as well, and he understands kind of the hoops you got to jump through to balance being a sports writer, especially in this new era, where you're never off the clock and you got to be on your phone all the time and all that stuff. He appreciates kind of the time you need to be a dad, be a husband, and his willingness to kind of work around that stuff is probably something that I don't know if I would find a lot of other places. So it's kind of a collection of reasons of why I've just been so comfortable working with Sean, working with Husker Online. And, again, I think a lot of it too is just, our personal dynamic, then also his ability to keep us at the forefront at really every turn.
Yeah. So we'll rewind just a second here now and ask you, what is it you do? Describe for us what it is you do at and for Husker Online.
So I guess my title is senior team writer. I focus pretty much exclusively on football and men's basketball, and that's been the case for all 18 years that I've been here. We've dabbled in some other stuff like covering baseball and volleyball and stuff like that, but with our growth, we've been able to expand the staff a little bit. So we have a full-time volleyball women's sports writer. We have Steve Sipple on there. We have a army of interns now that take a lot of like the wrestling and baseball and kind of those that other tier of sports off our plate. So football, men's basketball, I cover the day-to-day beat on both, at every practice, at every game, especially now with basketball, at every game. And written content, obviously our video element has really taken off over the last few years with the show podcasts that we do. And now kind of looking ahead, I'm branching out even further, where with the basketball success, I've tried to do some of my own video. That's still very much a work in progress at this point. I don't have a lot of video production experience, so we're learning as we go, but that's kind of just what this job is. It's constantly evolving. You're always trying new things to give the consumers what they want, and it's taken some adjustment. I'll be real with you. Like when I first started, I was writing long form feature stories and doing a lot of the notebook stuff and kind of writing everything that was said at a practice. Now, like, I don't know if the readers really want that as much anymore. The video content is probably one of the biggest things, if not the biggest thing that we do now. And they want short little graphs. And so it's, I've kind of had to swallow my pride a little bit with that because, I prided myself on, being a traditional newspaper writer, but in this era, if you don't adapt, you'll get left behind. So that's kind of the job is always evolving, and with kind of the everyday, video becomes more and more a part of it, but there'll always be a need for the written content.
Where is it on the bingo card? Did you see the men's basketball team being a top 10 team while the football team is not?
It was not on it whatsoever.
No,
And
nowhere?
I'll tell you what, like I was in like the most bizarro world setting this last weekend out in Bloomington, Indiana, because we were there on Friday night when Indiana football is playing for a trip to the national championship game, while undefeated Nebraska is looking to go 16-0 and remain a top 10 basketball program. Like the world was flipped upside down that weekend, where Indiana's stomping Oregon. Nebraska comes back for this epic win against Indiana. And so, yeah, I mean, that was kind of the perfect example of just what this season has been, that it's the strangest thing ever. I never would have thought that 16-0. I never would have thought top 10. I mean, even the idea of being a top 25, covering a top 25 program just seems so off in the distance. And, it's been crazy. I'm writing stories that I've never written before in my career here. I mean, I'm talking about Nebraska being a potential 2 seed, maybe even a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Like it gets weirder and weirder by the day, but in all the best ways. So again, I'm just kind of enjoying every step of the process here and kind of navigating uncharted waters for the Nebraska basketball beat.
Are they that good? Do you think?
I mean, the resume sure says it. And the thing that really jumps out to me is like, while there might be more athletic, more dynamic, more star-powered rosters out there, there certainly are. The kind of mental fortitude of this group, I think, is probably their most distinguishing trait. That regardless of the situation, where they play, who they play, when they play, any adversity they face, they don't flinch, and they just find one way after another to keep swinging and claw their way back. Where twice now they've overcome 16-point deficits. They've had 3 double-digit deficits that they've had to get through, and then the other types of adversity, like playing at home in front of a kind of sleepy crowd against a bye game that you're favored by 30 points and you're up by 2 at halftime. Well, they figured it out, and so their ability to kind of not let the emotions of whatever challenges are in front of them impact them, and the way that they're able to stay the course and stay level, that is why they are 16-0, and that is why they have the opportunity to not just have a great regular season, but have postseason success that is beyond Nebraska basketball's wildest dreams right now. So I think that they're a good team. They have a lot of talent. Rick Mass is an All Big Ten center. Price Sanford has been one of the most impactful transfer additions in the conference. Braden Frager is playing as well as any freshman in the conference. And then you got Jamarcus Lawrence, who, I mean, you go back when he committed to Nebraska, 2022, the maturity and growth that he's made over the last few years, from his freshman year to senior year, is about as significant as any I've ever covered. He went from a boy to a man, and he's probably one of the more underrated additions to this team with his leadership and the way that he plays and the things that he does. And then you can go down the list. I mean, Sam Hoiberg, the evolution of his career is one of the most remarkable things I've seen. Got a walk on that, people just thought he got a roster spot because he's a coach's kid. Now he's regarded as maybe one of the best glue guys in the Big Ten, if not all of college basketball. So, I mean, there's just one player after another that has met or exceeded expectations so much. And, that's when you get the perfect storm, like Nebraska's getting right now, then you have this type of season.
Yeah, for those who might be scratching their head now, we're recording this on January 12th. The team is 16-0. When you watch it, they might be 18-0 or might be 16-2. I don't know, but just for the record, that's when we're recording it. What's interesting is that if you had said 5 years ago, man, that Fred Hoiberg team's defense is awesome, you might have raised a few eyebrows, but with that sort of toughness and that integrity, is a defense that is really, really good, don't you think?
Yeah, and that's where it starts for me. Like, I know they've got some offensive firepower with the shooters they have, and Rank kind of being a unicorn of a center a little bit. But I think what makes them really operate at the highest level is when they're locked in defensively. And you saw that in the Indiana game when they get down 16
In the
that
second half.
comeback. Yeah, that comeback started by turning it up defensively, where suddenly they were able to at least control Lamar Wilkerson a little bit after he had 22 points in the first 23 minutes. They found a way to make someone else on that team have to beat them, and they were able to be more active and deflect passes and create turnovers. And when you do all those things, then the offense suddenly gets better because you're operating more in transition, you're playing with better pace, and the confidence that you gain on defense translates in your shooting. So shots that you were missing in the first half start to become a little easier to make for whatever reason. And so, that is kind of the heartbeat of what they do, where the offense is going to get a lot of the attention because of the versatile playmakers that they have, but they are as good as they've been because of the way that they defend. And that's a big hat tip to Nate Lenzer, where that shift to more of a defensive mentality started when Fred hired him in 2022, and his scheme puts guys in the right spots, but the other part of it is you need guys to be in the right spots. And 2 years ago they were not a very good defensive team. They had Casey and Rink and Bryce Williams that were scoring a whole bunch, but this team is different because of how much better they are defensively, and guys are always in the right spots. They understand the system, they know where they're supposed to be, how they're supposed to react to different things the offense does, and that's what makes them so good. So they're a smart team, a willing defensive team where they're putting in the effort to close out on 3-point shooters, to box out for rebounds, all that sort of thing. And so again, it's kind of a total complete effort where the coaching staff has put them in the right position to be very good, and then they have a willingness with the roster to play with the effort needed to be that good of a defensive team.
I'm going to pivot now to football, and we know football is king around here. And despite the fact they were 7-6 a year ago, that's a headline making, of course. And one of the headlines that was made, Robin, here is in the middle of the season, sort of 2/3 of the way through the season, was a contract extension for this coach, Matt Rule. At the time, I was critical of it, and I'm even more critical of that move. And I'm not asking you your opinion of that, but I do think it's a factor that is in play. That this coach is guaranteed lots and lots of money for the next 6 or 7 years. And at this point, my question would be for you is how has he earned that contract, or what does he have to do to earn that contract, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, gotta start winning now. I mean, we're entering year 4, and you have one kind of pedestrian bowl win to show for it. So I mean, there's no secret there. And going back to why the extension happened, I think Nebraska kind of got caught up in the rumor mill a little bit, where Penn State, the job came open when they didn't expect it to come open. I don't think it was a surprise that Franklin was fired, but the timing of it, I think, threw a lot of people off, especially Nebraska, because obviously Matt Rule's name jumped to the top of their board. Nebraska was rolling early in the season. It looked like this was going to be, a potential special season for them. And I guess Troy Dannon, you can say he panicked. You can say that he, got, misled, whatever. But, I think he caved a little bit and gave the extension. And at the time, like, all right, maybe you can justify it. And obviously in retrospect, that conversation has changed. But my biggest problem with it was the additional years that they added to it. Like, you can do the years weren't the problem. It was the buyout that I didn't really understand, because now Nebraska's put themselves in a hole where what if Rule wins 2 games next year and the fans are clamoring to axe him, and you got a $70 million check you got to write to have him not coach here anymore because you got kind of pushed to giving an extension maybe when you weren't necessarily ready to give it. So we'll see how it plays out. I mean, if Rule turns this thing around, it's going to be a moot point. But what does he need to do to justify it? Well, I mean, he's got a lot of ground to make up. Like, you just watch these playoff games, the Indiana, the Oregon, the Ohio State, and, now even, other programs, like the gap between the top of the league compared to where Nebraska is pretty startling just from a talent standpoint. And, you're paying all this money for your coach. Now you got to go pay all this money to get a championship level roster, because that's what it comes down to at Nebraska. You're not competing to win 8 games. Like, you're not competing to go to the Pinstripe Bowl or the Las Vegas Bowl. You're competing to play for a Big Ten championship, to go to the college football playoff, to compete for a national championship. And right now, it just feels like Nebraska is so far away from that. And the good news is that I kind of put it this way. The good news is that it's never been easier to flip a roster with the way that the portal is. And then if you have the resources, look at Texas Tech, you can go and buy a team. You can go buy a championship contender. The problem is that, while it's the easiest time, it's also the most difficult time because of the resources needed to do that. And right now, Nebraska just doesn't have a billionaire oil tycoon or Mark Cuban funneling, a blank check to whatever their teams need to go buy championship players. And so that's, what needs to happen first. Does Nebraska need to have, a higher level of donation to, pay at a championship level, or do they need to win at a championship level in order to garner that much more support? So it's kind of a tough spot to be in. And I don't know what the answer is, but I just know Nebraska has a lot of work to do if we're even going to have that conversation.
I've heard you and your honest and direct response to this. Do you get much pushback from folks with your really honest, direct observation about this situation?
Yeah, I get accused of throwing cold water on some of the more optimistic fans, but I think that there's also a pretty good chunk of the fan base that feels the same way. At some point, like, the talking only goes so far, and you got to start winning. Like, you can tell me what this picture is going to be like, what the plan is, and what the long-term build will eventually lead to, but it's got to start happening. You can't get blown out by 40 points for the last 3 games on national television when your season's on the line and it tried to sell progress like that's, and then have all your your quarterback leave, and I'm changing another defensive coordinator for the 3rd year in a row. Like, that you got to have some substance there to go along with your pitch and vision of what the future can be. And so that's kind of what this next season's all about. And of course, as the football gods would determine, it's probably the most difficult schedule Nebraska will have played, certainly under Matt Rule, and maybe since one of the Scott Frost years. So it's tough sledding ahead, but again, credit to Rule and his agents. They bought themselves a little bit of security there with that contract extension, and so now it's on him. It's on his coaches. Just within the last year, he said that he has everything he could possibly need to build a contender. Well, now's the time to go do it.
Yeah, and you mentioned 3 of the teams on their schedule next year: Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon, and then throw in Illinois and Iowa and Washington, and then some other Big Ten teams, and then 3 teams at the beginning of the year. They're starting with a bowl team, Ohio. Not that in Lincoln that there should be any question about who's favored there, but I guess my point is, if Rule wins 6 games this year, he might be coach of the year.
Yeah. So it's all relative, like
at a time when they can't afford to be at a time when they can't afford to be a 6-win team.
I know. So I mean, I don't know if there's like an immediate pressure here, but especially if he gets to 6 wins, considering what that schedule is. But there's a just as high of a likelihood that he doesn't get to 6, and you're talking about another bowlless season after like kind of one of your best pitches now is you've had 2 straight bowl appearances. Well, if you revert back to a sub 500 season again and you're left home in December, that's going to make it even more difficult to sell your vision of progress and development.
Yeah, I heard him say that we should have won 9 games this year. I believe that's not a direct quote, but he said team should have won 9 games this year. Do you agree with him?
I mean, the USC game was right there for the taking. Obviously, the last 3 weren't even remotely close. So, I mean, they were close, but again, like, close only get you so far, and you got to start winning those games. I mean, that's what defines great teams from good teams. Nebraska was a good team last year, and they certainly had their flaws, but they also had the easiest possible schedule they could have ever faced, and they won 7 games. So clearly they left a lot on the table, and maybe if Dylan doesn't get hurt, that changes some things. I don't know, but none of that matters right now because you are what you are at the end of the day, and they got to get a lot better going forward.
As we record this conversation, how do you think Nebraska's doing in the portal? How do you think they're doing in retrofitting its schedule? I mean, its roster.
Yeah, I think the big things that they needed to do was on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I think they've done a good job so far on the offensive line. They just finally got their first defensive tackle. They had to go to the junior college ranks to do it, so we'll see what that kind of picture looks like. But that D line, I think, is still kind of the incomplete right now on their report card. They spent all season talking about how they weren't big enough to stop the run in the Big Ten, and I don't know how much they've done. They've lost one of their best D linemen in Keona Davis, and again, only have a handful of additions up front to kind of help replace that. So good news is that like the portal is closing, but like that doesn't mean like the guys are in the portal, they can wait as long as they want to commit. So it's not like they're up against it, but you would certainly like to have your roster set going into winter conditioning, which I believe the team just reported back to campus earlier this week, and that's already underway. So while maybe the deadline from the portal standpoint isn't really a factor, the deadline of your off season is, and getting all these new faces and new pieces that you're going to be relying upon on campus within your program, with your strength and conditioning, learning the playbook, all that sort of stuff. Like every day is pretty important with that. So they've done okay to this point, but still a long road to go in terms of addressing all the needs they needed to address.
I'm going to say this carefully, but bluntly. I'm a University of Nebraska grad, way long time before you were, but I haven't lived here or worked here for most of my professional life. Sadly, this is not a sexy place to be any longer for football players, and they've got to figure out how it becomes a somewhat sexy place to be. And as you alluded to, just the eye test. Look at the quality of football players you're seeing in the playoff and you see in the stadium sometimes. This program doesn't have those quality players, and I have got to figure out how to get, again, my term, to get sexy, period.
Yeah, and when it comes to especially the trenches, like Nebraska's not the only team that is in desperate need of linemen. Like
Yeah,
that's probably one of the hottest
is.
commodities out there. So like you're paying top dollar for guys. And I think the other issue is like you can go get players, but with the money that you're spending, you can't afford to miss. And so like you not only need to like get players on your team, but you got to make sure they're good and they're going to be immediate impact, just given how much of a financial commitment now is involved with portal recruiting. So I do think that a lot of the criticism Matt Rule especially got towards the back end of last year was like, oh, maybe if he didn't do all these podcasts, or if maybe he was focused on his team instead of going on with Pat McAfee or wearing his hat backwards or whatever. Like, I think he's trying to brand the program, and I think that is important to a degree. But like, you can do all the photo shoots you want, all the multimedia stuff. But at the end of the day, there's nothing sexier than winning. And Indiana, like, you see Kirk Cinetti doing any of that stuff? No, he just goes out and wins and kicks everybody's butt every single week. So like that has always been the case, will always continue to be the case, that, you got to have a product that you can sell to recruits. Come to Nebraska and you will compete for a championship. Come to Nebraska and we will develop you into an NFL player. Look at our resume of draft picks. Like, those are the things that, in more than anything else, are holding Nebraska back. They're not putting enough guys in the league, and they're certainly not winning at a high enough level.
This is not scientific at all because I don't even know what the numbers are, but I'll listen to an NFL game and I'll hear somebody say, and that guy played at North Dakota State. There's even a Nebraska guy in the playoffs who played at North Dakota State, then transferred. And I hear that school more often in an NFL broadcast than I hear Nebraska. And that for me is as clear a message that they just have to simply get better players.
They got to get better players, and they got to have better player development once those guys are here. Like, they've gotten good recruits that never amount to anything, or like stay the same. They don't get any better. And like, I put player development right up there with recruiting as far as why Nebraska's struggles have been what they are.
Yeah, and you could do some inspection too about why the team doesn't get better during the year, why it's not very good in November, why they don't beat good teams. I mean, you can go down some data right down the line. Matt Rule does a lot of things really well. At this point, coaching games is not at the top of the list, period. And you don't have to respond to that. That's my opinion. Well-founded and true. One final thought, Robin. College football has never been more popular and has never been more in need of leadership, regulation of the business, find a way to manage the money. Do you see somebody, something, somewhere this business is going to get regulated? Somebody is going to kind of rein this beautiful thoroughbred, absolutely awesome thoroughbred that needs to be reined in a little bit.
Yeah, I hope so. I just don't know where that's coming from. Like, is this like, do you need the federal government to get involved? Do you need the power conferences to branch out and create their own league and have a collective bargaining agreement to where players are salaried employees? They're not student athletes, they're employees of a semi-pro football team. I mean, at this point, I don't know what more the NCAA can do, because every time they try to rein things in and establish some sort of guidelines, they're met with lawsuit after lawsuit. And I think now they're to the point where they just like put their hands up and say, "Hey, this is what you guys wanted. There you go.
Yeah.
Wild West. You guys do your thing and don't sue us." Like that's kind of where it is. And so I don't know from the current model what more can be done. There's got to be some extreme measures to where like either there's again like federal regulation with what schools are allowed to play players and keep their whatever semblance of amateurism alive, or you just cut the cord entirely and have the halves of college football in particular kind of break off and do their own thing to where they're no longer a college, they are a professional team. And that's, I think, the only way to truly regulate it on your own. And then the problem is, okay, how do you get the Big Ten and SEC to work together? Like they fight at literally every turn of every single conversation because they're only focused on their own self-interest. So the idea of, the power conference commissioners, especially the Big Ten and SEC, coming to an agreement on stuff like that, that also seems pretty far-fetched. So I honestly don't know where this thing's headed, but clearly, what is happening right now, in my opinion, is not sustainable. The money is not going to be there forever. And so maybe it just self-corrects. Maybe the boosters are like, hey, you know what? Like, I'm getting zero return on my investment when I'm just giving you millions of millions of dollars to go buy players. You guys kind of go back to the old way. And, maybe that's kind of the more organic solution, but I don't know if there's a lot of other options on the table right now.
Yeah, I know the folks in college athletics would love the government to get involved because they can't do it themselves. They admit it. I've heard Troy Dannon say it. We've got to fix this. But this iteration of America's federal government is probably not the most reliable to step in and fix something.
No comment.
Yeah, I mean, they can barely get enough people in the room to talk about it, let alone get some decisions made. So,
no doubt.
But one hopes. Robin, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.
Of course, John. Thanks for having me, man.
First time visitor to this little venture, and you keep that up, and I'll ask you back. So thanks.
No problem, man. It's fun.
All right, Robin Washut is senior team reporter. Is that what your
good enough
title-ish is? Yeah,
something like that. I think that's what I have to put on the resume, I guess.
There you go. As long as the checks keep coming and you've got some place to be, and we appreciate it. Robin's been with us on Watch the Media. I'm John Shrader.